Good afternoon and welcome to the Lynnwood Times candidate interview with Edmonds School Board Director District 2 candidate Melissa Stepp. Your opponents did not respond to our invite after multiple requests, so they're not here today, but I am your host, Lynnwood Times reporter Bo Brusco, and I am joined by Lynnwood Times publisher Mario Lotmore. Melissa is the Director of Operations at Molten Works Glass Studio in Woodinville. Melissa has spent her entire career developing employees, encouraging them to be independent decision makers and healthy adults. As far as education goes, Melissa graduated from the University of Hawaii with a bachelor's in speech communication in 2003. Wonderful. So our first question for you, Melissa, is a district director is responsible for reviewing and evaluating policies, establishing spending priorities, and developing instructional philosophies and goals. What inspired you to run for office, and what will your top 3 priorities be if elected?
The national politics of the last 2 election cycles have really been what's inspired me. A common theme throughout any of the commentary that I've listened to and read was that in order to make a real change, you have to be involved at a local level. The last 2 national election cycles have left me feeling that I don't have a whole lot of control, can't make an influence, can't make a difference, and it came up that there was an open school board director position. And I said, I think I could do that. That's local. That's something that I am interested in. And in conversation with the Snohomish County Democratic Party, I decided to run. So here I am. And of those, of the 3 things that are on my list, top 3, focusing on student engagement, increasing the general knowledge of the general ed teachers in what their students that are on ILCs need, and then increasing math and science scores K-12 across the board. I know that that's a goal of the district, and I would like to see that done without sacrificing creativity and critical thinking and learning.
Excellent. When you're on the school board, you're going to be obviously collaborating with other members, even teachers, all those sorts of things. But what is the best way to address differences of opinion on the board or between the board and the administration, in your opinion?
Listening with kindness. It's if I listen to understand rather than to respond, I will be able to come to an agreement, compromise, and learn from both the administration as well as other board members.
Excellent. What issues do you believe your district needs to address in its academic program and offerings, and what changes would you recommend?
In listening to the school board meetings over the last few months, especially since I decided to run, one of the conversations has been what to do about reduced enrollment in all of the, I forget the term that they use, but the advanced education, especially in the high school level. The difference between AP classes, international baccalaureate program, and then all the college credit classes that kids can take. And I would like to see a real critical analysis of what benefit the students are actually getting from each of those programs, as well as a long-term advantages for those. One thing that comes to mind with that is, it costs a lot of money to go to college. So which of those programs best reduce the amount of debt that someone would have to go into in choosing a college?
Excellent. This one is more about the students, but what do you feel are the top concerns facing students, and what do you propose to address those concerns?
Actually, you know what? At the very last school board meeting, they brought up some really valid concerns. Unanimously, they said that in-person learning was so much better for their health. They needed the socialization, they needed the social interaction. It was better for their mental health, and that made them better prepared to succeed academically. So keeping kids in school despite there being a pandemic, and making sure that there are systems and structures in place that allow them to do that safely is really important. The district does have a good plan for that, and they've got good graphics and communication from the Snohomish County Health Department for that. The other thing that they expressed concern about, which I found to be amusing but serious at the same time, is that we, at the high school level, we've expanded there to be 3 lunches instead of 2, which means that some kids are eating lunch at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
And I mean, you start school at 7:30 or whatever, right? So it is probably an appropriate break, but there's no, students either aren't allowed to get or don't have permission to eat in class in the middle of the day. They can take down their masks to take a sip of water, but they're not supposed to eat. So it means that if you eat lunch at 10 o'clock in the morning, dismissal is at 1:50, and then if you have 2 hours of practice afterwards, you don't have an opportunity to eat a meal for a good 6 hours. And so they're kind of hungry. So I think we might need to, listen to the students on that one and cut them some slack in terms of being able to eat in the afternoons. Another amusing story from that meeting was that there's been supply shortages on food service. And so they didn't have the regular pizza one day, and so they opted for the substitute, and the substitute was apparently really, really terrible. And so they took that feedback from the students real quick, and they're not going to order it again. So I think that students have a really powerful voice, especially at the high school level. We want to teach kids how to think critically and communicate and listen and be responsible members of their community. So I think listening to them about lunch, product and time is kind of important.
Definitely. Well, so this next question is, this is more of like a creative what-if scenario question. So if given a $500,000 grant to use in the school district, how would you allocate it in the best interest of the students?
This one actually was kind of easy for me. With all the multifamily housing being built, we need to build new schools, especially new elementary schools. We're already over capacity in the Edmonds school district. And as of last count, there are 9 multifamily housing units going in around 196th and 44th, plus, that's including the 2 up at the Alderwood Mall. And those kids have to go to school somewhere. And that's something that is a big challenge, especially with how buildings are funded.
Now I'm going to do a follow-up question, Melissa.
Yeah.
So I know the school just recently passed the levy, but what do you think the school district could have done better to communicate the need for just the need when they originally had the bond? Was it 2 years ago? I think was the vote that was turned down. It was just shy of a few percent.
I think there's a big gap in understanding between how the quality of the schools and how school funding affects every community member and not just the kids in school and their parents. As a community member, I recognize that my property values are directly tied to the quality of the schools in my area, and so I don't know that everybody realizes that. I also, on a it might be selfish or personal level, I'm going to need elder care at some point in the future. And I want the kids in my community to grow up and provide that care in a way that treats me fairly, and with dignity and respect. And I don't know that there's a good understanding of how quality schools affect everyone. I see the opportunity of being a new board member as an opportunity to also educate the community. So my education and learning what the board can do, should do, is also an opportunity for the community to learn alongside me.
Excellent. Well, in talking about how, because obviously not all schools are the same in their quality, whether it be academically or even just structurally, right? With the facilities. So there's a lot of discussion about the term equity, but what does equity mean to you?
As I was reading, different articles, and as I've been doing some research over the last, year, equity really is about getting what we want and getting where we want to go recognizing that not everybody starts in the same place. And so everybody should be able to get where they want to go despite differences.
Excellent, thank you. What kind of relationship should a district or the board have with its community, with its parents and families?
It should be a positive relationship. That seems like kind of a no-duh question, but it should be a positive relationship. The relationship should be based on a common definition of trust, as well as effective communication and an effective definition of listening. If we have a relationship based on assumptions and what we think the person wants to hear, that's not a trustworthy relationship, and we're not going to get very far.
What do you think is the most effective way of listening as a member on the board?
Honestly, it's listening first. And I come to the board with not a whole lot of assumptions or even knowledge about the board. That is something that I'm going to be really upfront about, is I don't have school board experience. I'm not I'm not ingrained in the lingo, but that means that I have a lot of room to learn, and that means that I'm going to learn from lots of different people, students, parents, teachers, educators, support staff, administration. That means that I have a lot to learn from everyone, and I think that's it. If everyone on the board approached every day and every interaction as an opportunity to learn as if today was their first day, I think we could really get pretty far.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we're nearing our last question here. Regarding school safety, what do you think the district is doing right, and where might there be an opportunity for improvement?
This was it was kind of tied to the, do you support school resource officers? No. I do believe officers do have their place on school campus, but not as a permanent part of the staff, especially because in most cases the officers are armed and in uniform, and that's not a great impression to leave. I think we should leave discipline up to the educators and the administrators on campus. But in looking at what the Edmonds School District is doing well, they are putting a focus on access to campuses and buildings and making sure that people with permission are coming in to the buildings. And so that's something that is important. We want to know who's in the building with our students and with our neighbors. Essentially, teachers are just as vulnerable as students. I think the school district could form real strong partnerships with the cities and the county where the schools are located to make sure that the areas around school are really walkable. Lots of crosswalks, lots of visible crosswalks, visible corners, and accessibility to the school. That's the right word. I live across the street from Mount Lake Terrace High School, and there's a light with crosswalks to get across the street, but you have to walk a number of blocks to cross the street anywhere else. And I think we could do more to slow traffic down and make it easier to walk to and from the schools, and encourage that outdoor behavior, especially as we look at transportation cuts and having to increase the walking areas around school because we don't have enough bus drivers.
Yeah.
So walkability.
Excellent. Well, those are all the questions we have for you, Melissa, but we would love for you to give us a closing statement.
Yes. In closing, I don't want anybody to think about my lack of experience as a school board director as a negative. That means, as Brene Brown says, when you are very vulnerable, that's lots of room to be brave and have courage. I've got to learn a lot, and I have the courage to do that. I am taking this opportunity to learn about my school board, and I hope that members of my community want to take that journey with me.
I'm going to ask a follow-up on your closing statement. So you mentioned about your lack of experience, but would you like to share what, how, because you're director of operations, correct? And I'm just asking this because I worked with director of operations, and I was in manufacturing as well. There's a lot of critical thinking in that. So would you like to just share how that has prepared you for this particular role?
You're right. I shouldn't default to lack of experience. It's lack of, I guess, being ingrained in school administration. I'm not somebody who's come up as a teacher, as an educator, and now onto the school board. But my experience, I led teams of lifeguards. That's where I refer to helping my employees become better employees. I've always recognized that they are not going to work for me forever, so I have a responsibility to set them up for success in the future. And as I reflect on my career, I've been leading teams for 20 years now, and that's a core value of mine, is setting people up for success so that they can succeed in the future, because they're not going to be with me forever. So that's part of what I do. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.